Hello, welcome to Dr. Sam's Anatomy classes. I'm Dr. Azmi Mohsen. I'll be teaching you about the sensory functional areas of the cerebrum, right? And before that, because I've already taught you about the motor functional areas, just have a quick revision. This is the supralateral surface, and here you have is the central sulcus, the Rolandic sulcus, right? And this is a type of limiting sulcus, so it limits the different type of areas anterior to this and the different cerebral type of cortex behind to this. So anterior to this, is the motor cortex. This is the motor cortex, which primarily occupies the frontal lobe of the cerebral hemisphere, and posterior to that is the parietal lobe. Hold on. This you are saying is the parietal lobe, right? And this is mainly the sensory cortex for different type of exteroceptive and proprioceptive sensations. And this is the occipital lobe. This is mainly for the visual sensations. This is the temporal lobe, mainly for the auditory sensations, as well as learning centers, as well as the gustatory centers down there. So what have you seen that the cerebral cortex behind to the central sulcus is basically the cornea cortex, the dust cortex, the granular cortex, mainly sensory in function. So this is what we are going to study. Okay. So let's begin with this. Now here you seeing is the two surfaces of the cerebral hemisphere. Here it's the supralateral surface, and this one is the medial surface. So on the supralateral surface, again you see is the central sulcus, and then behind to that is the postcentral sulcus. In between the two is the postcentral gyrus. Now postcentral gyrus is primary somatosensory area. Primary somatosensory area or primary somesthetic area also you can call it. Somesthetic is like when you talk about all different sites, sort of cutaneous, the superficial sensations as well as the deep proprioceptive sensations. So that's including every type of all these peripheral sensations, and that's why we call it as somesthetic area. So this is one general sensations is somesthetic. So this is primary somesthetic or primary sensory cortex, and this is numbered according to the Brodmann's classification. This is numbered as 3, 1 and 2. Okay, then it's also written as SM1. SM1, again remember MS1, MS2, right? So MS1 was 4 and 6 on the supralateral surface, and MS1 on the medial surface was the portion of precentral gyrus on the medial surface, on the part of paracentral lobule, and this area number 6 on the medial surface, right? So this was supplementary motor area, and this was MS2. Now here you are seeing in the sensory area, this area number, postcentral gyrus is referred as SM1. SM1 means it has both type of cells, but predominantly the granular cells. Predominantly it is sensory in function. That's why it's written as SM1. Okay. Then, it's receiving, we're talking about this area first of all. So this area is postcentral gyrus. The sensory areas are also located here onto the posterior surface of the central sulcus, right? Because it's limiting sulcus, on the two sides of this sulcus there are different areas. So sensory areas reach onto the posterior surface of the central sulcus as well, and the afferents to the sulcus, afferents to this and this gyrus, postcentral gyrus, the green color one, it reaches here onto the medial surface as well, and it becomes a part of the paracentral lobule. And don't forget, you have the motor homunculus, the representation of the body parts, the inverted representation of the body parts on the precentral gyrus. Similarly will be the representation of the body parts on the postcentral gyrus. Okay, and this will be called the sensory homunculus. So in this area, this area is the primary sensory area. So what does it mean? It receives primarily all the sensations from the body ultimately reach up to this gyrus. And, from the entire body, the sensations all, touch, pressure, vibration, 2-point discrimination, strongynosis, all those, exteroceptive sensations, cutaneous, as well as the deep sensations, proprioceptive sensations, they being carried mainly by the dorsal column, the spinal cord, which relays there in the nucleus of gracilis and cuneatus and the medulla, and these are the first order neurons, right? Remember that these fibers running in this fasciculus cuneatus and gracilis, they are the first order neurons. So they relay in these nuclei and the medulla, and then they form, the second order neurons. They decussate in the midline and they form an arcuate pattern, and that is called the internal arcuate fibers, or the area of the sensory decussation. And then when they reach the opposite side, they ascend up in the form of medial lemniscus, and that medial lemniscus, when it reaches this inferior posterior nucleus of the thalamus, or more precisely lateral posteroventral nucleus of the thalamus. So these second order neurons, they relay there. So now this site of the nucleus of the thalamus, that becomes the afferent for the primary sensory area. Clear? So afferents reaching to this postcentral gyrus are coming from the lateral ventral posterior nucleus of the thalamus. Okay? But now these are not the only inputs. There are fibers coming from the spinothalamic tract as well as fibers coming from the trigeminothalamic tract as well. And another important thing is that these fibers which are coming afferents to this region, they are not only like reaching to this, but like medial lemniscus also. Few of the fibers, they reach to area number 5 and 7 also in the superior parietal lobule. Few of the fibers reach here in the secondary sensory area or secondary somesthetic area. So that means this is, if there is a problem or any lesion in this, it doesn't mean all the sensory loss will be there. There will be sensations reaching to these areas. Okay. So I'll talk about the lesions and in the consequences of these lesions later on. So that was like, and of course it will be connected with association fibers to the other sensory areas, right? To the association areas, to the secondary areas with the association fibers. And of course it will be also connected to the opposite, the similar areas with, on the opposite cerebral hemispheres. Those will be its connections. Now about the areas represented. Well, I'll be teaching in the next slide, or why shouldn't I show it here only? Yes. So here you seeing is the sensory homunculus. Sensory homunculus, just now I taught you about the postcentral gyrus. This is the coronal section of the postcentral gyrus. Here you seeing is the green color shaded area. And they've reflected the part of this postcentral gyrus reaching onto the medial surface, and that's part of the paracentral lobule. And this area, remember, is called SM1. Capital S means having both pyramidal and granular cells, but predominantly a sensory cortex. So this is SM1. Okay, so now representation of the body parts here, it's same as the motor homunculus in the precentral gyrus. Here you find that in the lower portion it has an inverted representation of the body parts. So here you find is the area of pharynx, tongues, teeth, and then remember in the from motor cortex also, the face was having a vertical presentation, except the rest of the body was in inverted position. So face here also you are seeing is in vertical position, although the representation of face is bigger in size. Then you are seeing a big size of the index finger, thumb and the palm area. then you have the limbs, then you have the trunk, right? And this point here, the supromedial border, right? This point you find is the genitalia. They are placed here. And then on the medial surface, that's the area reaching to the paracentral lobule, here you find is the lower limb and the foot. Got it? So that's how there is a representation. Of course, the body areas which are more actually the areas, the representation is not very much similar for each body part, rather it is according to the area of the body which is more precisely or more intricately accepting or realizing or appreciating the different intricacies of the sensations. So which are more sensitive body parts, they have been given a larger area of representation. So because there are more amount of afferents reaching from those areas. So you see there this face has a bigger representation, especially the lips area, and the thumb and the index finger and the palm, they also have a bigger area, because these areas have more of ability to appreciate the and discriminate between different types of sensations. Okay, and one more thing before moving away from this slide, let me tell you that this down below where it reaches, like this is the postcentral gyrus, right? So down below you can say that down below here you will find is the temporal lobe, right? So in between temporal lobe and the parietal lobe, there is this, this is the operculated sulcus, right? And this operculated sulcus is the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus. So in this upper or the dorsal surface of this posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, you find is this area which I have drawn in green in color, and this area is actually 43, and this is gustatory area. Gustatory area. So the purpose I am telling here is that gustatory area, is what type of sensation? It is special visceral afferent, that is taste sensation, right, which are brought into the nucleus tractus solitarius in the upper portion, while there are other general sensations from the tongue and pharynx which are being brought, which are like general visceral afferent sensations. They are being brought in by the same nerves 7th, 9th and 10th, and they are being related in the lower portion of nucleus tractus solitarius, right? So just to tell you that this gustatory area is very closely placed to the area on the postcentral gyrus, that's the area for pharynx and tongue. There you find is area number 43 in the dorsal surface of the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus. Why? Right? Another thing is that I'll show you in the different slide. There is this area here which is reaching to this, or you can say it's even overriding to this gustatory area here. This area is the the secondary sensory area or second somesthetic area, right? So this area is the second somesthetic area or the secondary sensory area, right? Important about this is that this has a bilateral representation. Remember in the motor cortex, that area number 6, right? Area number 6 was prefrontal cortex, and that was reaching onto the medial surface, and where it was called as supplementary motor area, right? Area number, and that was MS2. So this area here is SM2, right? If it's not visible, you can write it at SM2. So just to make you remember that on the medial surface, both the two wala, MS2, SM2, both of them. So look here, though both these two, regions, either, SM2 or MS2, they are having bilateral representation. That is just to make you learn this. Okay, accessory supplementary motor area, area number 6 on the medial frontal gyrus, anterior to the precentral sulcus on the medial surface of the cerebral hemisphere. That is the supplementary motor area, and that area was also controlling the bilateral symmetrical, programmed activities. The word important is bilateral. Similarly, here written is SM2. Now, this area is secondary sensory area, and this will also receive sensations from bilateral sensations from, from both the sides of the body. But this area, the postcentral gyrus, that's the primary center area, this mainly receives sensations from the opposite half of the body. That means including face also, from the opposite half. Got it? Okay. And because I have drawn this diagram here, so why not cover something else also? Now, this area you seeing is present on the inferior surface of the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, right? And this is reaching, onto the inner surface as well. So, this is like the primary auditory area. Primary auditory area, area number 41 and 42. Okay. So, you have got to know enough of this. Now, let us move back to the slide which we were already following. Yes, so this one. So, you've been taught about this. Now, look here at this area. This area, in my previous slide, I show you that I had drawn it in yellow color. This is the area I was talking about. This is SM2, and being 2, I told you it was having a bilateral representation. So, the sensations from both the side of body are reaching here. And because it's receiving all sort of general sensations, that's why it is also called as secondary somesthetic area or secondary somatosensory area. Don't get confused, they are named as differently in different books. Hardly matters, you only need to remember that it receives general sensations, right? All this region here of the parietal lobe, they are receiving general sensations. So, that was the secondary sensory area, and this area, as you see, is actually, this is the parietal lobe, which is divided by this parietal sulcus into superior and inferior parietal lobule. So, this is a part of inferior parietal lobule, and it reaches down onto the dorsal surface of posterior ramus of lateral sulcus. Okay, now we will see is we talk about is the superior parietal lobule. So, superior parietal lobule is area number 5 and 6. Have you seen something, most of the odd numbers are representing the sensory areas, mostly the even numbers representing the frontal area, the motor areas, but this is not completely correct. Just to have a slight idea, in case if 6 and 8, right, and 5 and 7. So, it's easy to remember 6, 4, 6, 8. They are mainly on the frontal or the motor areas, and here you seeing 1, 2, 3 and 5, 7. All of them here on the parietal lobe, the sensory areas. Okay, then what's this area called as? This is basically association sensory area, right? This is called association sensory area, or association sensory area. Okay, and this basically is for some special type of sensations. What special type of sensation? And that is sensations of stereognosis. Like this area actually has a stored information about your sensations of the different objects, different things, what you feel and touch in your regular life, you get those sensations are saved here in the form of data. So when you next come in your life, and in case if you touch, palpate and feel and the shape and size of an object without the visual aid, and if you are able to guess the shape, size and everything by touching, so you can guess it. That means this type of sensation is called the stereognosis, right? Discriminatory touch. By the way, important thing is, can you think how a person who has been accidentally got blinded in his adult life, not congenital blindness. So one person who has been living his life normally, he has seen the world, he has seen different things, and accidentally he gets blind. Now it is this area which will function as his hidden eye. Got it? The writing, this blind, actually the blind people, they have this braille, this type of writing. They feel, they touch and palpate those letters, and they can, guess what's written. So touching and feeling and getting the idea from your past experience is making you realize and appreciate what you are touching. So that is this area 5 and 7. So it's like, sort of third eye in case you get blinded in your adult life. Got it? Okay, and this is named as, somesthetic association. Don't get somesthetic, whatever you feel, you can say somesthetic or sensory. It means all the general sensations. Okay, so this is association sensory area. Okay, and the important thing I was telling about is that you can palpate. Yes, the example for this is like you have been using the coins, the currency used in your countries, and they are placed in your pockets, the different coins, like you have a 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 5 rupee, 10 rupee coins in your pockets, and and you are asked to bring out rupee 5 coin from your pocket, without seeing it. Of course, when you placing your hand in your pockets of your trousers, and you are like touching and feeling the coins, and you are bringing it out, like, look, this is the 5 rupee coin. You're confident enough because you have already been exposed to that coin for several times, so you have that idea and stored in the form of memory. So here you got it now. You remember that this association sensory area is like a memory center of your past experience of touch, tactile discriminatory touch sensations. And in case in where you are visually occluded, in that case it helps you recognize the objects by the sense of touch, discriminative touch, right? And that's called stereognosis. Okay, so that was about the general sensations on the parietal lobe. Now I will be teaching you about the occipital lobe. So the yellow color code lobe you're seeing is the occipital lobe. Okay, it's present both on the supralateral as well as on the medial surface, right? And on the medial surface, like this is a superior and inferior occipital gyrus, separated by a transverse gyrus here, and here you are seeing is this calcarine sulcus, right? And this is this area you're seeing is like a tongue shaped, so this is called the lingual gyrus, right? So let me tell you that this the importance about this, the sulcus, which is mainly responsible, which is mentioned as the primary visual cortex. That area is area number 17, and that sulcus is called the calcarine sulcus. You are seeing here, this is the calcarine sulcus. This is sulcus is the calcarine sulcus. Got it? And now think about what type of sulcus is this. I have taught you about the different types of sulci. This is a complete sulcus. Complete sulcus means it goes deep inside the gray matter and even it dips into the white matter such that it indents the cavity of the lateral ventricle, and here it will be the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. So it indents the ependyma of the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. That's why it's called a complete sulcus. Okay. Now the thing is, this occipital lobe, right, you know, it has a lot of significance because it's very important. It's important for the visual functions, for the sensations of vision and sight. Actually, this area, while during the embryonic period, it's when it's growing, the brain is growing, it's all confined within the bones, like, you know, intramembranous ossification of the bones of the cranial vault happens much earlier than the enchondral bones. So the bones of the cranial vault start ossifying very early. So that means that the nervous tissue within this fetal skull gets restricted. So what happens that the enormous growth happening at this occipital pole doesn't get more of space. So this calcarine sulcus, because of its exuberant growth, it moves on the lateral surface. It gets, you know, it reaches onto the lateral sulcus in the form of, you can see here, like this much. And this much sulcus on the supralateral continuation of the calcarine sulcus is called post-calcarine sulcus. So this is called post-calcarine sulcus. But now this is classified differently. This is example of axial sulcus. This is an example of complete sulcus. Why axial? Axial sulcus is a form because of the exuberant growth of the tissue, and because it gets folded on itself because there was no more space to spread around. So that's why it's called axial sulcus. Okay. Then another important thing about this, there's so many important points about this. So calcarine sulcus is, yes, so calcarine sulcus, I'm telling you that calcarine sulcus, you know, the radiations, the optic radiations from the LGB, right, lateral geniculate body, the fibers, 90% of the fibers from the optic tract, they relay into this LGB, and from there these fibers which reach to the calcarine sulcus are actually called, you know, geniculocalcarine tract or the optic radiations. So before they reach here, these are the third order neurons which reach here, third order neurons of visual pathway which reach here. It's a band which reaches here, right? There's a Meyers's loop, right? I have all taught all you in all this in your visual pathway. So Meyers's loop, which was representing the lower half of the hemiretinae, and there's radiations, optic radiations reaching, you know, from the upper half of the retinae. All of them, they are relaying here. So the fibers which are representing the lower half of the retinae from the LGB, they wind around this inferior horn of the lateral ventricle, that's called Meyers's loop, and they come and relay here on the inferior surface of the calcarine sulcus. That means there is a representation of the lower half of the retina on the inferior surface of calcarine sulcus, and fibers coming representing the upper half of the retinae, they come and relay here onto the upper surface of calcarine sulcus. And don't forget that lower half of the retina represents the upper half of the visual field. Upper half of the retina represents the lower half of the visual field. Okay. So that optic radiations, when it reaches here, you know, like the CNS that includes here in the brain and cerebellum, it's a gray matter which is on outside and the white matter which is on inside. And in brainstem and in spinal cord, it's the white matter which is on outside and the gray matter is central. So here with those band of optic radiations, when they reach here, before reaching to the gray matter, they are placed here onto the surface, and that's why you find is a white band of fibers running in the calcarine sulcus onto the surface, right? And that band, important is, it's visible to the naked eyes. In the gross specimen, you can see that white band of fibers running over to this calcarine sulcus, and that is called stria of Guignard. That's called stria of Guignard. Stria of Guignard is, and because of that, this area is also called as striate area. This is also called as striate area. Okay. Okay, and then the fibers of coming from the retina, they have the same pattern how it was in the retina, and same pattern comes and relays in the lateral geniculate body, and from lateral geniculate body the same pattern is relayed here. So means to say that the image formed is absolutely same here also, but the thing is the macular fibers, right, the fibers from the macular region, they come and occupy a bigger area, right. Let me use another color. Yes, so this area you are seeing is the area above and below to this calcarine sulcus, right. So upper half the retina, lower half the retina carrying macular fibers, they relay here into the posterior end of the calcarine sulcus, right. And this macular, in the center of macula is the fovea. So those fibers from the foveal end, right, fovea is having only cones, so it's the area of the brightest vision and color vision. So that reaches here onto the post-central gyrus. Okay. So the post-calcarine sulcus, and the fibers coming from the peripheral portion of the retina, they come and relay here onto the anterior portion of the calcarine sulcus, right. So the representation of the fibers coming from retina is peripheral to central, right. Central means macula, right, and center of macula is fovea. So fovea, fibers coming from fovea, they reach up to the post-calcarine sulcus. So that is how and the macular area is represented in a much larger portion of the calcarine sulcus posteriorly. So that means there is a lot of space for compared to the peripheral fibers from the retina, there is a bigger space for the relay of the macular fibers. Now with this comes another importance is that, because if you are having any sort of damage or injury or lesion in your peripheral retina, your life doesn't becomes much handicapped unless you have a macular fibers intact, you can continue a good life. So what I am saying is that this macular fibers, the macular vision has more of significance, even the fibers from fovea. So by nature that everything has a significance. So that the blood supply onto this surface, suprolateral surface, the major blood supply is by the which artery? Yes, middle cerebral artery. Middle cerebral artery supplies the occipital in fact this all the region you are seeing here is being supplied by middle cerebral artery. This is middle cerebral artery supplying the post-calcarine sulcus. Now on the medial surface, it's the anterior cerebral artery, And on the inferior surface, let me tell you that this inferomedial border is not very clear cut demarcated. So this calcarine sulcus and this surface of the occipital lobe is mainly on the inferior surface, inferomedial you can say. And the blood supply, and it overrides the tentorium cerebelli. So the blood supply of this in supratentorial surface is mainly by which artery? This artery is posterior cerebral artery, right? So blood supply of the calcarine sulcus is by posterior cerebral artery, reaching up to this occipital pole, and on the supralateral surface it's middle cerebral artery. So got to know that fovea now has a dual blood supply. Got it? So that is another important point of this postcalcarine sulcus. Now about this lesion, brain is suspended free within your cranial cavity, it's floating within the CSF. So in case of trauma, head trauma, if you're not wearing a helmet and in a road traffic accident your head hits the ground or the road with your occipital bone striking the ground. So what happens? Your brain bombards against the frontal bone. So in that cases there'll be chances of anosmia, because the frontal lobe or down below you have those olfactory bulbs, and olfactory bulbs are connected to olfactory epithelium via those minute thinned out olfactory nerves passing through the cribriform palate. They easily get torn out, and it might lead to anosmia. When you hit the ground in an accident with your frontal bone striking the ground, your brain strikes the occipital bone from inside, and in this case there might be chances of rupture of these blood vessels, and there are chances of blindness. Now, what type of blindness depends on what area of this calcarine sulcus undergoes ischemia. There will be homonymous hemianopia. It depends on what area, if this upper half, lower half, posterior end, anterior end, where exactly there will be focal ischemia. So accordingly there will be a loss of vision. But to prevent the fovea, the area of brightest vision, you have at least this much of advantage, that in case of ischemic injury, this has a substitute, right? That is, it's being supplied by two arteries. Got it? So that was about the blood supply of this area. And now I will be talking about something different, and that is the area adjoining the area number 17. So just above and below both the sides you have area number 18. Now 18 is also called as parastriate area or paravisual area, and beyond to that you have area number 19 adjacent to area number 18, and that's called perivisual stria or perivisual area. Got it? These, and let me tell you an important thing is, these are just the names, they are all separated by sulci, and even on the supralateral surface also you have like separations between 17, then you have 18, then you have 19. Important thing is all these areas are interconnected by these association fibers. You have association fibers connecting 17 and 18, connecting 18 and 19, and even connecting 19 to 17 as well. So all this is interconnected by international neurons. An important another thing is that the fibers coming from LGB, lateral geniculate body, which is called geniculocalcarine tract or optic radiation. Don't forget that all the fibers of the optic radiation, they do not completely get submerged in this area number 17. So part of the optic radiation also directly reaches area number 17. Part of the optic radiations also reaches directly into area number 19. Got it? That's important. Okay, then what will be the purposes of these areas? These areas are actually, now let me tell you, first of all, 17 is related to, which was the primary visual area. It helps you identify that there is light or there is no light, right? So appreciation of the brightness, the intensity of light, vision is that, you're seeing these things around, that means your 817 is fine. But to understand the depth of the, vision means the three-dimensional view, the height, the length, the breadth, the curvatures, the corrugations and everything, if you're appreciating with the help of these peri and para visual striate areas, area 17, 18 and 19. So one thing is that, then you also are appreciating the shades of colors. So that also is being helped by these association areas, visual association area 18 and 19. These are also called visual association areas. Okay. Then you have another thing is like, one thing is, three-dimensional view, then you have colored view with the help of these associations. And another important thing is with your past experiences. That's why it's called as visual psychic area also. So with your past experiences, it helps you recognize the objects. Like your, the person whom you know, you will be able to identify because of these visual psychic areas. So they also retain the memory here of your visual experiences, right? So this is all interconnected. And yes, so representation of the retina, don't forget that peripheral is anterior and macula is the posterior end, right? Okay, striae of Guignard also I have told you. So I think this much of the occipital area is done. Now I will be talking about the auditory functions, right? Auditory areas. Now primary auditory area. So you look here, this is the temporal lobe, right? And temporal lobe has two sulci. You have a superior and inferior temporal sulcus, and this one is the superior temporal gyrus. So these sulci, superior and inferior temporal sulci, they also reach to cut this inferior parietal lobule into three parts: anterior, middle and posterior, right? And this one, is called the premarginal gyrus. This is the angular gyrus. Behind to this second one is the angular gyrus. Well, those are reaching into the inferior parietal lobule. Now I am talking about this superior parietal lobule. As you remember that slide which I had shown you of the sensory homunculus, there I had shown you that this, is the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, and on the inferior surface of the posterior ramus, this area, that is the primary auditory area, which is present on the superior temporal gyrus. It is hidden down there. It reaches on the inner surface of the superior temporal gyrus. And there are transverse, sulci, and because of those transverse sulci, this gyrus is separated out, right? This gyrus is separated out, and this is called gyrus of Herschel. Gyrus of Herschel. This is gyrus of Herschel. Okay, HESCHL. This is another name for the primary auditory area. Primary auditory area is a part of the superior temporal gyrus, and more of it is reaches deep inside this inferior surface of this operculated sulcus. Okay, and that is mentioned as area number 4142. Got it? So this is area number 41. Mainly it's 41 and 42. If you have to select out of the one, out of these two, you will select that area number 41 is primary auditory area, present in the gyrus of Herschel. That's why it's also called as transverse temporal gyrus. Okay. Now about this gyrus, this is called primary auditory area. Let's a fast revision of the the auditory pathway. I think less of space is there, and if I try to draw, let me draw it here. I think it will become crooked. This is cochlear nerve nucleus, right? Cochlear nerve nucleus lies adjacent to the inferior cerebral peduncle. So cochlear nerve nucleus, it reaches to the the first order neurons. Okay, in fact all have been taught you already, so there is no need of drawing. You just memorize. In fact, memorizing what you have studied with your closed eyes or without a diagram in front, just memorizing with pictures, imagining, that even helps you retain the concept for a longer time. So now start thinking. I've already taught you about all this. So in the transverse section of pons, let's talk about it. And this is the inferior cerebral peduncle that reaches there, and the functional columns has also been taught to you. So this sensation of equilibrium and auditory function, both of them are classified as special somatic afferent, and special somatic afferent is the lateral most functional column. So there are laterally placed nuclei. Vestibular nuclei is laterally placed, and it even gives an impression into the floor of the fourth ventricle. And even lateral to this vestibular nucleus, you find the cochlear nerve nucleus, and there are two, dorsal and ventral cochlear nucleus on the two sides of the inferior cerebellar peduncles. Okay, so from the from the internal ear, what was the receptor site for this hearing pathway? It is organ of Corti. So from the organ of Corti, then to this these first order neurons, they relay there in the ipsilateral cochlear nerve nucleus. That was first order neurons. The second order neurons, from the cochlear nerve nucleus, most of the fibers, they decussate to the opposite side and reach to the superior olivary nucleus. But remember that few of those fibers from the cochlear nerve relay into the ipsilateral superior olivary nucleus. So these are the second order neurons. Now from these in superior olivary nucleus, both the sides, contralateral and from the ipsilateral, both of them ascend up to reach the inferior colliculus in the midbrain, right? And this ascending pathway is called the lateral lemniscus, right? So that's why, remember, when I was teaching you about the transverse cut sections, I told you that lateral lemniscus you will not find in a transverse section of midbrain at the level of superior colliculus. Got it? Because they go and relay in the inferior colliculus. So those are the third order neurons. Now from the inferior colliculus, there is a brachium connecting to the medial geniculate bodies, and that's called inferior brachium. So from this inferior colliculus, via this inferior brachium, fibers reaching to the medial geniculate body, these are the fourth order neurons. Got it? Then from the medial geniculate body, fibers radiate out, like visual optic radiation. Similarly here it is acoustic radiation. So from the medial geniculate body, these fifth order neurons, they radiate out. So the fifth order neurons from the medial geniculate body, they radiate out and reach the ipsilateral primary auditory area. Okay, so that was about the auditory pathway. So these fibers, the auditory radiations, they will ultimately reach in area number 41, 42, that is present on the superior temporal gyrus in the form of transverse temporal gyrus, and that's called gyrus of Herschel. It will relay mainly in the 41, 42. Now about the spatial orientation of these fibers, that's also important. If like this area I had drawn it here as the gyrus of Herschel here, area number 41, 42, right, and this is anterior side, this is posterior side. So the relay of fibers, you can say in this area, let me use another color so that it becomes more visible. This is how there is a representation of the spatial orientation of the auditory pathway. So auditory radiations, when they the fifth order neurons from MGB, they relay here. So the low pitched sounds, the spatial orientation of the representation of the auditory radiations is according to the pitch of the sound. So the low pitched sounds जो होती हैं, they are relayed here in the anterior portion, right, and the high pitched sounds, they relay there in the posterior anterolateral portion of the gyrus, is the fibers carrying low pitched sound waves, impulses from the low pitch sound, and impulses from the high pitch sound, they relay on the posterior medial portion of gyrus of Herschel. Here you see are the high pitch sounds, right. So this is about the pitch of the sound. Okay. Now about the association, auditory association areas. This was area number 41, 42, the primary auditory area. Posterior to that you are seeing is this auditory association areas. This auditory association area is numbered as area number 22, right. So this is auditory association areas. Now one thing is also to be understood, that this auditory radiation which was coming from medial geniculate body, it does not like completely ends up or completely reaches and merges with this gyrus of Herschel. Rather, there are some direct fibers from the MGB, they also relay here in association areas like area number 22 also. Just like I told you in case of occipital cortex, if you remember, I told you that from LGB, all of them, they do not relay in the 17 area, but few fibers also directly from LGB reaches to 18 and 19 also. Similarly from MGB, most of the fibers no doubt relay here, reach here in area number 41, 42, but few fibers they also reach in area number 22. Now this is auditory association area. So what do you mean by auditory association? Means like you are hearing the high pitched, remember high pitched, you are hearing the sound high pitched. Where were you hearing the high pitched? In posterior medial portion. The high pitched sounds were conveyed here, and low pitched sounds जो होती हैं, they are perceived here. The high pitched are perceived here, okay, at the posterior medial end. So apart from listening the sounds, comprehending those sounds, like assessing the meaning of those sounds, and like that's called comprehension of the auditory stimulus. That is being created here in area number 22. This is for the area number 22, comprehension of sound waves. This is for comprehension of sound waves of the auditory stimulus. Like if you are asking somebody a question, so he understands what you are asking, right? That is what is area 22 of. And now what he has to answer to your question, that also is like this area number 22 is helping you from his past collected memories. You gradually grow up in life, you start recognizing in fact the voice of the persons, you start knowing the different auditory impulses, the meaning of the questions being asked. So that's why, and you prepare yourself for the answers because of your past memories. Like if you ask somebody what's the place where you live, where's your home, or what's the name of your father, these are some simple questions which are like already stored in your memory, and they will be correlated with the auditory impulses for the answers to be given. So this is area number 22, like that's for auditory association area. Okay, now this I will tell you when I'll be teaching you about the lesions of these areas, right? Although let me tell you that some authors call it as Wernicke's area. But this Wernicke's is actually a still controversial, or you can say debatable topic, because authors have been writing it differently. Some are writing 40, 41, some are writing 22, 21. Let me tell you that Wernicke, some are saying that it's the middle temporal gyrus area number 21 is also included Wernicke's area. So it's not exactly been it's a debatable topic. Let me tell you about this great scientist Wernicke. Wernicke was a German scientist, a neurobiologist, right? And he was in the mid or the late 18th century, around 1880 somewhere. He published his research work. And before that, it was Broca's. Let me tell you, Broca's was French scientist, right? And Broca's worked on the Broca's area, that is expressive speech, the motor speech area 44, 45, and he was there in early 18th century. And later on in the early portion of the 20th century, no, let me tell you, it's not 18th century, 1800 something is called the 19th century, right? So in the 19th century, both these great scientists were there. Broca's in early 19th century and Wernicke in late 19th centuries. And this Brodmann later on in 1912, that is the early 20th century, he classified the different areas of the brain into this functional classification in 1912. So by the time Broca's and Wernicke were not there. So there is this complication now exactly to which area to be called as Wernicke's area. So there is a lot of literature, a lot of research work people have worked upon, but exactly to name which number to Wernicke's, either 22 or 41 or 31 or 21, this is a dispute. So we must not spend much time upon this. That's just to give you an idea. If you are going to study deeply, you will find such queries arising in your mind. Okay, so that was about association auditory area. Now what else remains? Yeah, there is another special sense called gustation sense of taste, right? And that sensation comes from the tongue, hard palate, and the epiglottis, right? And the three nerves carrying these sensations are via the facial nerve, glossopharyngeal and vagus. You know that. There are also general sensations being carried from that nerve, and all these were being relayed here in the nucleus tractus solitarius. The special sensations in the upper portion of this nucleus tractus solitarius, while the general sensations from the tongue, these are general visceral afferent, will be relaying into the lower portion. Special visceral afferent gustations will relay in the upper portion of nucleus tractus solitarius, which is an elongated nucleus in the medulla, both in open and closed portion of medulla. Now from this, this nucleus tractus solitarius, actually the sense of gustation has to be relayed in the primary gustatory area. And remember, I was showing you that slide of sensory homunculus. There I showed you how this posterior ramus of lateral sulcus was separating the temporal and parietal lobes, and it was an example of operculated sulcus, right. So in the dorsal surface of this posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, you will find is gustatory center, and it is like below to this, on the lower end of this central sulcus, that is primary sensory area, and at the same point was the secondary sensory area as well. So there you find is area number, this is area number 43. Although this will not be visible here because it is embedded deep inside the you can say in the dorsal surface of the posterior ramus of lateral sulcus, and you can also say that it is in continuation with this posterior central gyrus, and here also this secondary sensory area will also reach to the same surface. So that was about gustatory areas. Okay, just to remember that it is area number, this is area number 43, gustatory area. What else is left? And this sensation, remember, gustatory, if it's in operculated sulcus, you've been taught about the lobe hidden down below to this, that's insula, right. So this sense, this gustatory cortex, it reaches onto the insula also. Okay, and this, there was the sensory homunculus, remember. So on the sensory homunculus, the parts represented here thus was tongue and pharynx. So the general sensations will also reach near to this special visceral afferent sensations. Got it? Okay. And then what special sensations is left is olfactory sensations, although that has been taught to you with the olfactory nerve. This area here you see infromedial portion of the parahippocampal, anterior of the parahippocampal gyrus, that's called rhinencephalon. It includes the piriform area and the hippocampal formation, and the primary secondary areas. Primary area is basically the piriform area and the periamygdaloid area and the anterior portion of uncus, and uncus mainly the posterior portion, maximum portion of uncus is a part of secondary olfactory area, and that's called entorhinal area. All of this is called allocortex, like also called rhinencephalon, and it's a primitive cortex. It has only 3 layers. So this is about the sense of olfaction. So this is how we have done with the surface different sensory areas. Homunculus has also been discussed with you, sensory homunculus, and this is about the different motor. Frontal lobe we have already studied. Frontal lobe I had told you about in detail. Parietal lobe, about all the sensations present here, like this is the primary somesthetic area, this is the secondary area, like secondary association area. Take 5 and 7. Then Wernicke's they have mentioned as 22 here, 40 here. I told you there is a dispute among different authors. Need not worry about the numbering, but you should know the purpose and the function. All this, the location I've already told you in everything. Then representation of the body part is upside down here in the post central sulcus. Rest of the body parts, they don't have a specific pattern, and the functions of these areas that are also been discussed to you, and effects of lesion onto these sites will be taught to you separately in my another lecture, right? Okay, so now in this slide you are seeing the occipital and the temporal lobes. It's mainly the visual, here it's the mainly the auditory areas, and this has also been done. Some authors, you can say, they give it this area, you know, area number 22, some call it as Wernicke's, and this is called audiopsychic area. Okay, and the area numbers, location, functions, right? Representation, although in this primary visual they have written that macular area has the largest representation and it is more posteriorly placed, and in case of auditory area, I told you that anterolaterally it is the low pitch sound and posteromedially it is the high pitch sounds that are perceived. Okay, and lesions of course will lead to agnosia, is like loss of identity, loss of interpretation, of loss of recognizing the visual impulses which we already have been knowing in your past life. So if you're not recognizing, that is visual agnosia, and if you're not hearing, recognizing the auditory impulses, that is visual agnosia. This happens because of the lesion of visuopsychic area, means association visual areas 18 and 19. Lesion will lead to visual agnosia, and lesion of audiopsychic area, that is gyrus of Herschel, remember. So in case of lesion to that will lead to auditory agnosia, because you will not be able to identify the sounds. So both of them I have taught you, and now what else is left is it's done. Okay, thank you.